Okay, well, first off, David, it's awesome to talk to you today. I've been following your work for a while. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for making time for me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And I know you've told this story probably 100 times before, but as someone else who managed to kind of escape the academy and pursue a radically different path in life, tell me about how you become a dating coach. You know, how do you go from being an academic, being a professor, to becoming a dating coach? I find that really interesting. And like, how the hell did that happen, man?
Yeah, now over 15 years ago, about 16 years ago, I was coming out of a separation and then divorce with my wife at the time, and had no clue what I was doing in dating. And I was a grad student then, just starting my PhD. Well, actually, I was in the middle of my PhD program at that time. And I was a real big nerd and geek, and an argumentative one. I was a philosopher. And that was very anti-seductive. So coming out around almost 30 years old, going out to the single scene again, I just realized, I guess, how awful it was. So at that time, the book by Neil Strauss had just come out.
The Game.
That fall. The Game. And I was lucky that in my class on Buddhism, I was teaching an intro to Buddhism. There was a student who was the business manager and coach for one of the largest dating skills companies in the world at the time, Wayne Elise's company, Charisma Arts, I think they called it back then. And I got to know him really well and the coaches there. And that just started me on that rabbit hole of pickup and becoming a pickup artist, I guess you could say. And then eventually starting a blog around what I was doing, just sort of more as a diary for myself, just to keep records of learning various skill sets and conversation and whatnot. And then that morphed into a practice as a coach, other guys asking me for advice and then wanting me to take them out and all that. And I was doing this as I was finishing off my PhD. And then when I got my PhD, I became a professor in the Department of Philosophy at the National University of Singapore. And by that point, I kind of cracked the code on academics. So it was hardly, I didn't have to spend much time on it. I had colleagues who would spend until 10 p.m. in their offices doing God knows what. But I got all my work done in a very condensed amount of time. And then I was out to the bars and the clubs and dating and just having a flourishing social life. So I had a night, like a side job on the weekends and in the evenings as a dating coach. And that was about over 10 years ago when that was happening. And then over the last several years, for other journeys I've gone through in my personal life, have had to dive deep into clinical psychology and psychotherapy, and have been getting training in that and incorporating it into my coaching. So discovering that our deeper issues are what we were actually supposed to be, what we should have done, instead of papering over our lack of meeting our own emotional needs and so on by doing this other behavior. Went deeper into the psychotherapeutic material and been doing that for several years. So that's eventually how I became a full-time coach. About 3 years in being a professor, it came down to, do I want to continue to teach 20 to 30 undergrads Buddhist epistemology and metaphysics and having them forget everything we covered once the exam was over? Or do I want to make a real difference in people's lives, which I was doing as a coach, even back then as a dating coach, and seeing the transformation in their personal lives and their happiness and fulfillment, and the women that they make happy, and just seeing a bigger impact in the world as a result of doing that kind of work. So it was an easy call at that point. It was a little bit nerve-wracking because I'd never gone out on my own like that and having to get my own visa for Singapore and all that, but it all worked out really well in the end. So here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Going back to those days when you were a prof, I mean, did your colleagues and students know that you were leading this kind of, I don't know if double life, that might be a bit dramatic, but that you were doing?
Oh, yeah. So the first month I was in Singapore, I was, as pickup artists are wont to do, infiltrating the social hierarchy. And on the men that were really cool. There was a woman who was a journalist for one of the national papers. And when she found out I was a dating coach, she wanted to break the story. So I was sort of naive in the sense of, like, I had never really held down another job, like a real job. So who reads work contracts and things like that, right? Just sign, give me the money. So I didn't know that there would be any kind of conflict at all. And I was very strong in my frame, right? That's what pickup art is supposed to be like, strong in your own frame. So I could not be shamed about anything I was doing because, well, I had no shame around them. I was just being honest and forthright. Anyway, so she broke the story. It came out on the front page of the national paper the second week of the school term. And there was a 3-page spread in the middle of the life section. It was in the middle of the paper, which is the life section. It was a 3-page thing on me. And that became a big deal. And I was there. The chair brought me in to speak to the dean. And the dean and provost, they thought it was really cool. But they're like, this is causing some PR that we don't want to have to deal with. We have to manage it. Like, I totally get it. I had no idea that this would be such a big deal. And the chair really didn't like it. So the chair gave me a hard time, undermining me. In my second year, she actually pulled in for questioning into her office individually, one by one, my third-year students. And I had found out like halfway through this inquisition from my students, like, Professor Tian, do you know that this is happening? I'm like, what? This is complete. So that was when I decided I'm out. I'm quitting. It's bullshit. This academy bullshit. So that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And then I started planning the escape in a formal way.
There's a line by Camus I think about all the time where he talks about the fact that we have to make peace with our unlived lives. And I mean, do you ever look back and wonder like what would have happened if you'd chosen to stayed in the quote unquote safe academic path and not become an entrepreneur? And like, do you ever look back and not necessarily thinking it'd be better, just wondering what it'd be like?
I don't have to look back because I still have many friends there.
Right. So
when I meet them, I'm like, I would be, and some of them, they're struggling. Some of them have tenure and they did all right. Actually, in terms of professional goals, they all did well. And some of them did really well. But the university is in disarray, like the higher education's gone to crap. And plenty of universities that were in business for over 100 years, private ones, are now shutting down, or they're massively downsizing, cutting entire departments, or merging departments, especially in the humanities. And they're just trying to turn themselves into job farms, right? Which is, I guess, as a private institution, is what there's people paying them to do. Get me a job at the end of this thing. And my idealist professor friends, almost all of them are idealists, bridle against this, that they have to produce students who can make a living. And these students aren't good academics. They don't care about the critical reading and the original sources and all this. I'm like, dude, this is a money-making venture, and they don't understand how the world works in terms of the capitalist world and what their role is there. So I already know what it would have been like if I had stayed down that path. So, yeah. It's the same, like, whenever you do major transformations personally and you meet your old friends back before, you kind of get that as a mirror of what it was like if you'd stayed on that path. Like my friends in high school, many of them still in the same hometown, their whole lives, in their 40s now, with kids. And then they write to me saying, whoa, Dave, you're traveling all over the world. You're having this great life, man. How are you doing this? Like, I'm so envious. I'm like, that's great. I can show you how to do it if you want. And even with kids, and you can still do it. And then they're stuck in this rut, so they're going to go through the typical midlife crisis, I think. I had my midlife crises many times, much earlier.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that, but actually just very briefly for more background. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're Taiwanese, but you grew up mostly in Canada. Is that right?
Yes. So around the age of 4 or 5, like 4.5, I moved to Kansas City, Missouri with my family, and my parents were doing grad school there. And then we moved up to New York for a while, and then eventually to Toronto, where I think by the time I was 9, I think it was Toronto. And then stayed there pretty much until I went to McGill University for undergrad, and then finished my undergrad at Toronto. And then I moved to Michigan, got the little flag thing there, around 25 when I did my PhD. And
just out of curiosity, I mean, what drew you to sort of build a life in Asia? Was it simply your academic pursuits and then things followed from that? But have you ever considered going back to North America?
Good question. Yeah, good question. So I was sent back as a good Taiwanese Canadian kid every other summer to spend at least 2 months with the relatives and learn Chinese. And then my first year at McGill, I was pre-med. That first semester, just biology, chemistry, physics. And then I had calculus. And I had one elective. The one elective I chose was Intro to East Asian Studies. And that was by far the most enjoyable course. So by the second term, partly because I was doing so badly in the pre-med courses, I switched over to the Bachelor of Arts and from the Bachelor of Science, and chose East Asian, broadly speaking, like religion, history, East Asian, and loved it. I had to do the language. So a big part of that was doing 4 years of modern Chinese. And I was still getting sent back. Like my parents would fly me back to Taiwan, even in undergrad, to do a summer in Taiwan. And I liked it. I didn't love it then, but I liked it a lot. And it wasn't until I moved to Beijing in the beginning of my dissertation phase, and I had to do an immersion year of language, that was the year I really fell in love with Chinese culture. Like I loved the ancient Chinese culture, anything from Qing dynasty earlier. But modern China was, to me, sort of like gray and drab and all this. But then when I finally moved there and really immersed myself, it was just so full of color. And so there's so many adventures around every corner for me. And whenever I went back to North America, and I'm sure to Toronto, Michigan, it's like nothing has changed. The same set of stores on the same streets since I was like 15 are still there. Of course, there are changes, but in the broad stroke of things, like, didn't seem like things were changing. Whereas when I was living in Beijing, when I first moved there in 2004 or 5, when I left for literally 6 weeks to go back and do some stuff with Michigan and come back, in that 6-week period, a new grocery store had opened up 3 blocks from our apartment and then had closed, and a new one had opened up. So like, there's so, like, that's just one 3-block stretch. And it was just amazing how rapidly things were changing, and how it was still very much plugged into the traditional or ancient culture. So that whole richness was there. But then, of course, all of the modern changes were happening as well. So that was exciting. So yeah, lots of stuff going on. So I couldn't go back. Also, the food was just so much better for me. Just like so many more flavors. You know, I grew up with Chinese food, so it's home food for me. It's like comfort food. So having all the different varieties in China, of all the regional variation of Sichuan and Dongbei and Xibei and then the Shanghai, and, you know, it's just like in Guangzhou, of course, having all of those different cuisines available with full restaurants just dedicated to those. And when you go to Japan, there's just like one restaurant for one type of dish, like just a ramen restaurant or just tonkatsu or whatever. It's amazing. And I discovered Southeast Asia by accident because I got that position at Singapore. I didn't know much about that Southeast Asia, to my embarrassment at the time. And once I discovered Southeast Asia, it would open up this whole other, even richer in many ways, gateway to culture. Because in a very small space, relatively, like you could fly end to end in 4 or 5 hours. In that space is, I don't know, over a dozen major ethnic groups with their own languages and culture and food, and this is amazing. So there's still so much for me to learn about that area. I've since moved back to East Asia, and am fascinated constantly by what's happening in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and especially right now while we're filming this with the protests there and what's happening. So it's like you're living in history. Yeah. Whereas when I'm in Toronto, I feel very safe and secure, but kind of bored. You know, suburban life kind of thing. And I don't know, that's just me personally. So.
No, I can relate to just about everything you said. And even though my family background isn't Asian, I mean, you know, I moved to India for a year when I was like 19, I guess. And just ever since then, I've been spending a lot of time in this part of the world. And a couple things. The one thing I just always think of is, and this is going to sound condescending perhaps, but I just feel like it's just in general, everything's more interesting. Like you say, the food and the history and the culture and the streets and the colors and the people. Like, I just feel like, not necessarily the people, but just the general environment I find a lot more interesting. The other thing too, and it reminds me of when I lived in Colombia, there's a real sense among young people that things are happening here and our lives are going to be better than our parents' lives, for better or worse. And that can lead to, you know, that can have some downsides in some ways. You lose some of the culture with progress and modernization, but there's a sense of optimism that I find that I don't find when I go back to the West, unfortunately. So we could spend a whole podcast on that, but I want to get back to pickup artistry because, I'm sure a lot of your audience, well, I'm sure all of your audience knows generally what that's about. But maybe you can help paint a picture of like what your life was like during those years. What did it mean to you to identify as a pickup artist, and what you learned?
Oh, wow. Yeah, great question. I haven't been asked that for a while. Okay, well, how much time do you want to devote to this? I don't have a prepared answer for this one. So
just in general, I'm just curious in general, like what were those years like for you? What were your weekends like? What were your goals? What were you striving for?
Oh, okay. So what was the lifestyle like? It was a lot. Well, so as an academic, I was not trained or encouraged to be social or to go to bars or clubs, or I was encouraged to stay home and study, as I was since I was a young child. So learning that you could get that it was actually a skill that you could get better at, like the public speaking or networking. That's an actual skill, being good at conversations in these environments and learning the social norms there and navigating them well. So I approached it like anything else that I learned. I got all the books I could find, got all the video courses and everything I could find, and went the spare time I had. And then I would go out and apply it. So normally that would be Friday, Saturday night, and that would extend to Thursdays and Wednesdays after a couple of years, after maybe just 1 year. So I was out generally Wednesday, Friday, Saturday night at bars and meeting my friends. The first 6 months or so, you don't really have any friends there. So you have to make them. And that process, I didn't understand any of that, by the way. I was just doing, back then pickup was really socially weird. It was learning some kind of opening gambit, and then being able to transition out of that into some way of holding her attention and making her laugh. Like it was all scripted, horrible stuff.
Were you peacocking, David?
I tried to. Well, actually, according to the pickup artist, I was. But all of that was just awful. So I developed, just through trial and error and learning about, just observing, like an the natural leaders in that environment were like and what they were doing in their mindsets, and documenting those for myself. Anthropologically, learning from the inside what it was like, I changed it all. So I was a lot more natural, a lot smoother, just making friends as the first priority, and just having fun as the number one priority, learning how to have fun, enjoying the music, getting conversant even on the music, because I was a jazz and classical guy, as most academics are. So just learning Kanye and all that's like new for me. It was pretty embarrassing looking back at it, but I didn't listen to any of the top 100 songs. So then just getting into the pop culture, attacking it like a cultural anthropologist of imagine I were to study bar and culture and club life to write a dissertation on it as a sociologist. That's what I was doing. And I had to get the basic research down and then assimilate, like get into the local culture and infiltrate the elite circles there. So then it was, of course, for my own purposes, like dating. So connecting with women that I found attractive. And then usually Sunday was the hot day. That's when all the texting would go out. I was doing this in days before smartphones. So we literally had a texting device. That was what the cell phone was. You made calls and you sent text messages. And so anyway, just Sunday was text day. And then getting feelers for who was interested. Then I'd hook up a date Sunday. And then usually from that, people would say, oh, I'm busy Sunday, but can you want to meet during the week? And then I'd hook up Monday, Tuesday, and maybe Thursday. So every night of the week, I was out of the house, very different from my academic years, academic focus, I mean. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. I learned how to be social. I learned how to speak with all different kinds of people. And I learned how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I learned about fashion, made many, many fashion mistakes along the way, and met very colorful people that I would never have met if I'd stayed in academia, for sure. And it was fun. So a good 2 or 3 years of just solid fun. The first year was constant embarrassment and anxiety. But once I figured it out, it was a lot of fun. But it's just like any guy. I mean, it's coming in my early 30s. So I think any guy in college and early 20s, you should live it up. Like, you don't want to live a life of regret looking back, like you didn't party enough or whatever. Just get it out of your system. Go out and have some fun. and learn what it's like when young people get together and have fun. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Get that period out. But you want to hopefully grow from it, because it's sort of like you get to eat, you get to go to a buffet that's really nice and have whatever you want for a while. And then actually I lived in hotels for 4.5 years as a ambassador level, and it was great. And then eventually I realized what else is, like, I asked myself, what's next? What else is there? I still feel kind of empty and lonely, and going back to the pickup period, not the hotels. Okay, what else is there? And getting into a relationship and realizing I had no skills or knowledge about relationships back then. They do not transfer at all. Like, pick up into, like, lots of people think they do, and they try to make it happen. And I was right at the cutting edge of that as far as pickup guys getting into relationships, but it was just all awful. And I had to learn the hard way. And that's when I dove into the psychotherapy to understand what was actually happening in the underlying issues. So anyway, that's hopefully a glimpse into the life of a pickup artist.
Yeah. I want to come back to the point you're making about not all of the skills you're learning during pickup translating into sustaining, a passionate long-term relationship, because I think that's absolutely crucial. And I agree that there's a misconception that a lot of this stuff, applies, and a lot of it just doesn't, I think. But you mentioned, and I've been watching more of your videos lately, and you've talked about some really dark times you had through those pickup years, and some sort of, you mentioned earlier you've had some midlife crises, plural. I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what that was like for you, like what was it like to go through that and what you learned.
Well,
I guess David, what I'm curious about is, because I've followed your work for a while now, and I've seen a transition. There's been some real changes, thematically, and the way you speak about certain things. And it even seems to me the way you see your past and stuff. So I guess I'm curious if there's some kind of like bottom, so to speak, of your quote unquote pickup years. Did you have some low points that really made you reconsider where you're?
Yeah. So I would consider those not there's one bottom that transitioned into my interest in psychotherapy, that at that point in my life, I was trying to make a relationship work. So I didn't consider that the pickup phase. I was still a dating coach and was coaching guys who wanted to do that, but I wasn't. And a lot of the anxiety was happening for pickup at the beginning when you're still learning it. It's important to and realize that that's part of what makes you who you are now. All of these dark experiences, or maybe like these phases in your life, right? And I don't regret those phases. Maybe I wish that I could have gotten through them faster, but generally I had a good time. So there was a period where, like I was saying, I tried to transfer, everything I knew about social psychology. Well, I thought it was just psychology in general, but it's really just certain types of social psych and evo psych, evolutionary psych, that would then transfer into sustaining a relationship. But in pickup, there are different goals. Trying to get sexual attraction and lead to a physical intimacy is different from love, and any deep connection. So if you're thinking about frame, like the frame of the conversation and controlling the frame, if you're thinking about push, pull, cocky, fun, if you're thinking of any things to think about, you're already sabotaging the relationship. If you're thinking about power, who has the power in this relationship? It's already game over for you. You're in the wrong game. You're not in the relationship game. You're in this other thing. And it took a long time to figure that out. And I'm still learning every week about that, experientially and theoretically. So, so that period, that transition, maybe this is what you're trying to get to. I was in this relationship that had become actually from the beginning it was toxic. I was seeing multiple women. I just chose one of the women I wanted to be in a relationship with, because actually the practical reason was I was trying to start this new business. That was the period when I was leaving the university and starting my own thing. And I really didn't want to get kicked out of the country. I wanted to make sure we had enough capital so I could apply for my own visa and sponsor myself, the whole deal, right? And I moved to a smaller, cheaper apartment, started taking the bus everywhere, in the subway, instead of cabs. And I was a little nervous. The first time starting my own business, going out on my own. And I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't want to spend my weekends clubbing. I wanted to spend it learning copywriting and building a web page and, the whole deal. So I thought, okay, I'll pick one of the women I was dating. That was not a good option. That was not a good idea. And then I just applied what I knew to that. And it was a lot of power games. And I've made multiple videos on what I've learned from those experiences of that failed relationship. And I got to the point where I was suicidal. And I was standing at the edge of a 57-story building, trying to work up the courage to jump. Just getting to the edge was a challenge, by the way. They purposely make it hard for you to jump. Like I was looking, I have to clear a 6 foot, because if I don't jump far enough, I'm going to just go to the next floor down, because they tier the damn thing. I didn't realize that until I got up there, that there's a garden underneath me.
Like a good academic doing your research, right?
That's right. I was standing there in my head like, okay, I got to get enough running room here. And then like tears, I'm trying to, and then I send out my farewell emails and messages to my friends and family. That's what triggered it. Like one of my best friends was like called me right away, like, where are you? I didn't answer. And then eventually when I was like, I'm not sure I can make this jump, he called this maybe the umpteenth time, and I picked up. He's like, where are you? And I mumbled something, and he ran and pulled me off the edge. And so then he was on suicide watch for like 2-3 days. And then we hung out like pretty much every day for the next 2 weeks, just because he kept finding where the heck I was. And it was actually really nice. It was sort of a call for help, call for attention that I did unconsciously. So I had some friends who are all over the world just calling me and saying, dude, we need to talk, and this sort of thing. And it was great in that sense, but I didn't alleviate my feelings of meaninglessness in life and all that. And that came about because I was a narcissist. I had become a compensatory narcissist. I might have been a narcissist for much longer, but I definitely, once I learned pickup, I was really good at narcissistic behavior, and was able to flip that to get short-term gain, women, dating opportunities, moving up the social ladder. But that actually exacerbated my psychological, what would you call them, weaknesses or psychological issues, the underlying issues. And a narcissist will hook up with another narcissist, but they'll be in different pairings. So because I was a compensatory narcissist, the term I use, which is a narcissist who's compensating for the fact that he didn't know how to be a good narcissist. So I was a narcissist, but I was a codependent, covert one. Then I learned through pickup the skills to become an overt one. So I was now projecting all this overt narcissistic energy, and that attracts the pure or predatory narcissists who've been narcissists since way before 11, 12 years old or whatever. And these are, a lot of them for this type of women who had lots of male attention when they were younger and learned how to manipulate that and got off on it. And were also in some ways verbally or emotionally or physically abused, and that pairing came along together to create that power dynamic. Anyway, there's a lot of literature on narcissism, and I was the other side of that coin. So any kind of pairing along these lines will lead to tons of drama that will just escalate, and that's exactly what happens. It can escalate quite violently and dangerously, and I was on the losing end. So that's where I went. And I didn't know how to analyze any of that. I had no idea what was actually happening. I just felt like life was meaningless. There's a good friend of mine who runs datingskillsreview.com who reached out and said, Dave, I heard what happened, where you're at, and you should get in touch with our other friend, Mark. And this friend happened to be Mark Manson, and that everyone now knows. This is many, many years ago. So I reached out to Mark, and we hopped on the phone several times, and he was really good at just pointing out the literature that I should look at. So he was, I think, one of the first people that got my attention on, like, there's this clinical psychology stuff. You should actually pay attention to it now. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, holy shit, yeah, this is explaining exactly what I was going through. And yeah, that started me down, just hunting down all the best resources, people, and still doing lots of therapy training myself and getting the certifications and things like that. So yeah, that's
interesting.
Darkness to light.
Yeah. No, it's quite a story. And I'm sure we could spend an hour just on this topic alone. So take this question however you want, but I'm really curious to know about maybe some of the paradigm shifts that you had to go through, transitioning from being a good pickup artist to being a good boyfriend and now a good husband. Like, what are some of the mental shifts you had to make, or different habits you had to sort of incorporate into your life? Or
yeah, so the pickup phase was fun, but I don't recommend it. at all to guys, because you have to unlearn everything. None of the skills that you'll learn and pick up will make for a good relationship. It will make for a good social guy. So you'll be able to take many things away from it to apply to career, professional life, especially in any kind of negotiation. Anytime you're dealing with other dudes, other guys, especially, of course, in the same settings in which you were trained for it, bars, clubs, that nightlife, that kind of thing. Directly transferable in those cases. There are some things that you want to soften and take a new mindset towards, but the skill set is still there. But when it comes to relationships, all of the PUA material, and as well as nowadays the red pill and more bitter and even more toxic than pickup in many ways, is just designed to hide vulnerability. It's designed to protect your downside. You're saying all these things and doing these things to protect yourself from getting hurt. And like the average needy guy will say, "This is not what you're supposed to do. Every guy does that." And I'm here to say, yeah, maybe 80% of guys do that, but that doesn't make it right. Just like it might be that 80% of people in this city are obese. Doesn't mean obesity is right? Like, it's not good for you to hide or to protect your emotions in that way. What you need to do is get to the point to be secure enough, and that you don't need to do that. And then secondly, to be overflowing with the positive emotions of love or connection, that you don't need it to come back from others. So it just flows out of you because it's who you are. Getting in touch with those, your pure self, your true self, your inner child parts that are holding all of this love, and not being afraid of just letting it out, to be okay with having that go forth and not needing it to come back, not needing it at that kind of neurotic level of needy love, but in that being able to be in that energy of unconditional love. So it's just who you are. This is who I am. I'm going to be good, even if you're nasty. That doesn't make it so that I'm going to become nasty. I'm just going to be good. I won't spend any time with you. I'll stay, I won't invest any time or effort in you, maybe, because you're an evil or bad person. But that's not going to mean that I'm going to become evil or bad in return, so I can manipulate you and get some kind of revenge, which is what, some bitter versions of that kind of ethos of red pill or the bitter pickup artist would do, getting revenge on those slut girls or something like that. It's all bad all the way. So I prefer to take a guy who's sort of a blank slate. He hasn't gone through the pickup route. He doesn't know much about it. And he just has a good heart. And he wants to get into a relationship with a woman who has a good heart. And he's got issues, of course, as we all do. And he's going to now pay attention to those issues and work on that to make himself more secure, more integrated with all of his parts, getting more self-leadership, as IFS therapy would say. And then being able to just put himself out there more and leading with vulnerability. And so when normal dudes hear that, they think, oh, you pour out your guts. No, that's your neediness talking. So you can't lead with vulnerability if you're still very much looking for others to meet your own needs. So you work on your own inner issues of meeting your own needs. And then at that point, once you get to a critical mass on that, then you can get out there and just be open and vulnerable. That is, here is who I am. And this is how I want to be in the world. These are my values. These are my principles. Here's who I am. Boom. There you go. I'm expressing them. I'm not hiding them. I'm expressing them. And I'm open to see what happens with this other human being that I'm conversing with, whether they'll meet me there or whether they're going to get guarded. And maybe I want to give them more rope, and spend some more time to see whether they let their guard down. But if they start coming at me with any kind of aggressive energy of narcissism or ego or whatever, then probably wouldn't be interested in continuing further. But I'm not hurt, because I put it out there. They don't appreciate it. It doesn't matter, because I'm not waiting for it to come. I don't need it to come back, because I can meet my own needs. I can give love to myself, connection to myself, and so on. That work takes a while, and it's never really done, right? Just all the time. So that's what I would say as far as like going from pickup guy to being good in a relationship. You need to be able to meet your own needs so that you have two full individuals to come together, not two people who are trying to get others to meet their needs and meet my damn needs, or I won't meet yours, and this whole escalating tension and battle as a result of that. But like two full individuals who are complete on their own, who can then come together. And then even then, now you have to learn how to have that in connection with each other, right? Then it's a whole other can of worms, or, you know, a whole other subfield of relationship counseling.
Yeah, you have a great talk. I think I'm not sure if it's one of your free mini courses or if it's a long video on YouTube. It's like over an hour long about how to keep a relationship passionate. I think it's one of your free courses. Yeah. This is a massive, massive topic, but as a guy who's married now and kind of, you know, really trying to figure a lot of the stuff out in real time, what's a quick version of that? That's a totally unfair question, but what are some principles you've learned about returning to that passion? Because the myth that makes me crazy is people think that it's just automatically that, you know, you fall in love once and you can never, you know, sort of come back to those feelings ever again, that sex has to fall off a cliff after you get involved with someone, all these myths that are still, you know, out there quite a bit. What are you learning as far as that stuff goes?
Right. Well, this is a big question, right? So I have done a free masterclass on this. So if you're watching or listening, David Tian PhD.com, on there will be an opt-in form. You get access to the free masterclass. And I've also done a 4-part video series on the secrets to a successful relationship. And that's even deeper. So there are these quick tips and surface level, quick things you can do. And some of these are actually quite deep as well, like presence for one. But then there's an even deeper level that no one will be able to escape. And once you can go through that process of undoing your unresolved issues, which will come to a fore in the relationship, in a love relationship, in an intimate relationship, because it's very easy for us to hide those or to repress those, which is what actually we did to get on in life. And then they'll come out in an intimate relationship. And if you don't tackle those, no matter what other things you do on the surface, like date nights or whatever, no matter if you don't, it doesn't matter what you do in the techniques, if the underlying issues are not resolved or not healing and growing from them, then the relationship is doomed. But if you can grow and heal from those unresolved underlying, often childhood issues, then it will flow very naturally. Then you won't need to schedule, like to remind yourself to schedule a date night. It'll just happen because you'll want to do it and you'll be looking forward to it. And it's like the thing you look forward to the most. Like, and meeting your wife's needs will be the thing that will give you the most joy, right? Rather than trying to force it to happen. But it's such a deep concept for the average dude.
Could you mention your 3 P's? What is it? Is it passion equals polarity plus presence? Is that it?
Oh yes, this is in the.
I really dig that idea.
That's the free masterclass for how to make a relationship passionate. And I also went into that for the Rock Solid Relationships course. So we have a whole 40-something hour course on relationships for men to succeed in their relationships. So presence. So polarity is a big thing. So polarity and then presence. Let's just stick with those two, polarity and presence, because one thing I just recently got out of researching red pill, which was painful to research because it was so much anger there. And one of the things that they're missing is they really, really want, it's a very immature masculine energy that wants to rest. They want to get into a relationship so that they don't have to do anything. Like guaranteed sex for the rest of my life without having to do anything. Yeah. And their ideal is a woman who will meet all their needs for them, and so without having to do anything. They just sit back and have all their needs met. Like come home, wife's barefoot, pregnant, whatever. Like
I think
make me food.
You've cited this as well in your videos, but I think the first chapter of David Data's The Way of the Superior Man is stop hoping for completion of anything in life.
Yes,
and it's excellent. Like these guys are trying to find that, right? Like one
exact
day
opposite.
Done.
Yeah. So so if you get so once you get into a relationship, you should keep growing. So that's something that if you just keep hoping for a completion, you're never going to have a successful anything, career, life, relationship, nothing. And so same in the relationship. So polarity has to continue to grow. That means you got to still grow your masculine energy. So I have a whole course for that. That's very affordable, made it as affordable as we could. But it requires some inner work. You're gonna have to go through these guided meditations and all that. And it's called Core. And it helps you it gives you basically workouts for your mind and heart through meditation to help you build that masculine energy so that you can continue to build the polarity. So the polarity in the relationship will the more masculine energy you can bring, the more feminine energy it will call out of her. And then she will be able to relax and trust in you and to lean into you. And that will create the passion right there. The polarity, when it's depolarized, then there's no passion. When the man and the wife are just friends, or, brother-sister relationship where they just kind of hang out. And that often is just because the guy stopped growing physically, pushing, going to his edge, challenging himself, and then she has to pick up the slack and she becomes more masculine as a result. And then they just become buddies. That happens a lot.
I'm a Tantra guy, and I've talked about Tantra and stuff in the podcast. So I hope my listeners are familiar with polarity at this point. And honestly, we could talk about this all day. I want to be respectful of your time. I'll just direct people. I mean, you've got a ton of free stuff on your YouTube channel. I mean, hundreds, I think, of videos. And your free masterclasses are really good as well. Strongly encourage people to check that stuff out, because you're putting really, really valuable stuff out there. And we don't have much time left. But you mentioned the red pill, which is a rabbit hole I've been going down recently, just learning about these people. And God, man, I don't know about you, but I see a group of the most insecure human beings on the planet. I mean, really. Oh yeah. It's painful. I mean, these guys are terrified of women. I mean, anyway, so the red pill, just really, really briefly, how would you describe it? It's an underground collection of guys trying to figure out dating, figure out women. And they've taken that extremely tired, overused Matrix analogy of I've taken the red pill, I can see how it really is. And the truth is, yes, there are some aspects to it that are, not entirely off about, women responding to certain cues and building attraction and stuff. It's not like it's all bogus, but so much of it is really, really toxic. I get guys reaching out to me all the time, I'm sure you do too, who are sort of flirting with that red pill ideology. In a nutshell, what would you tell guys that are kind of tempted to go down that path? And again, you've recorded a couple of really great videos on this topic, which I'll link to, but in a nutshell, what would you tell these guys?
Yeah. Well, first, depends on how deep down that hole they've gone. Yeah. So I get guys in my groups who are solid red pill guys, and they related to talks I've done there's one on the reality of women where I point out that they're not all princesses who want ice cream and unicorns and stuff. And they're like, yeah, they're sluts and whatever. I'm like, I didn't say that either. Right. And then, it's interesting how, I did the red pill work because of requests from guys for it. So I would try to lead with the predominant feeling that I get when I'm reading it is compassion. Because, it's coming out of being hurt, right? And I was there. That's what led me to be suicidal. So I totally understand it. And in a way, it comforts you because somebody else feels your pain and you're not alone. So that's fine. You got to come out of that because it's full of fear and insecurity. Now, I've pointed that out many times, and guys get all defensive. Like, yeah, but of course, wouldn't you be afraid and insecure if a woman ripped your head off? And all? We start with that, but we want to grow out of it. And if you lead with fear and insecurity, which is what all of these tactics and principles that are coming out of red pill, like the how-tos out of red pill, are all rooted in insecurity and the fear of loss, that she could hurt him. So he's going to spin plates. That's one of their dictums, spinning plates. You want to see multiple women and have that going around, because basically you want to spread your neediness around multiple women instead of just putting it all in one woman. And then you can't handle that. That's too scary. And she could, make you feel bad. So you can't deal with the sadness and loneliness. And the hurt. So you're going to have to do all this other mental gymnastics and stuff like that, psychological gymnastics. So deal with the fear and insecurity first. That's the root problem. And as you begin to address the fear and insecurity underlying your relationships with women, then you'll discover the deeper issues. So that's just the gateway to the underlying issues. So that I would say that at least be able to see, because these red pill guys, they front like they're tough.
Oh, like I've never seen before. I mean, every one of them is Donald Trump on Twitter, and it's
there's so much bravado.
It's insane.
But anybody who's mature can see right through it. It's like a little kid, puffing his chest out. Oh, you don't need to do that. We like you the way you. And the leaders are like that. So I want to point out there's so much fear and insecurity, just to highlight to the guys who are on the edge of it, dabbling with it. Hopefully you can start to see the little boy who's screaming right now and pretending to be tough. because it's all of these tactics are driven out of being scared. Like they're scared for their lives when it comes to women. They're scared of getting hurt again like that other bitch did to them. And because of that, they do all these other things. And hopefully they'll see that, so they'll disrespect it enough to look in the other direction of looking inwards, actually, to the fear and insecurity that is driving them to those decisions and strategies that are making what makes those strategies actually appealing. And they'll be able to do some of that inner work and start encountering the parts of them that are holding that fear and insecurity and begin to heal them.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's very well put. And I would totally agree. Yeah. Ask yourself, where's this need to have, where's my hunger for the red pill coming from? Really? Where's my hunger for this ideology coming from? Because I think you're bang on there. Switching topics, thankfully, completely. Actually, I don't know how recently, in the somewhat recent past, you got married. So congratulations for that. I think that's fantastic. Thanks. And I'm always curious to talk to guys about this. I was just on the phone actually earlier this week with Dr. Robert Glover. I asked him the same question. How did you make that decision? I'm always fascinated how people make that decision. Like what went into it, and how did you know that you were ready to make that commitment?
Oh, right. Well, part of it was the timing part of it was practical. So I think in the West, or like liberal or cultures, whatever, you live together and raise kids together without that many repercussions. Like Richard Branson didn't get married until one of his kids was 7 years old, and the kid was getting asked in school, like, why are your parents not married, or something like that. So they got married for the kids and not have to deal with this. So, it's not like I'm saying everyone has to get married or something. But we were basically in that position where I was flying around a lot. I was living the remote digital nomad life, and I was doing it a lot more often. Like I was moving around a lot more often than most nomads do. Seems like most nomads will do 3 months or something in one country, but for work reasons, I was in and out every 2 to 3 weeks of a different country. And my normal route was Bangkok to Bali with Singapore in the middle, because I got Singapore as a free layover on Singapore Airlines. So it was like a free trip. And I do my business in Singapore. I got at 3 days down, and loved it. Back up to Bangkok for 2 weeks, and then redo that whole thing. And then 3 months a year, I'll be in the US or Europe. And it's hard to sustain a relationship like that. Now, she can follow you, but unless she has some assurances that this is going somewhere, for her to quit her job, and try to do something remote and basically start a new career, she has. So my wife, fiance at the time, had a job, right? We wanted to be together. So I wanted to give her that assurance. And I kind of, in a way, like the man can do it for the woman. Like I know from her past that she's sort of anxious about guys just like leaving her or whatever, and from her father and all that. So like I wanted to give her that reassurance. And that's a big part of creating chemistry and passion. What women need from men is the presence, and that requires vulnerability. But they also need reassurance and attention. And if I'm not able to reassure her, she's never going to be secure in that relationship. And eventually, over time, it will become toxic for her, and for the relationship. So it will become toxic for me. So it got to a point where, like, I don't really want to just keep this itinerant life-like relationship going either. Like when I'm in Singapore, I pop in, and she'll come out to Bangkok, like for a long weekend or something like that. But I want it to be like, we're going to build a life together. And once that happened, then we looked into the practicalities, or I began it without telling her about the marriage possibility, but like, what if we get a visa? Like I could go to Singapore. It's kind of a ripoff. I don't really like it there as much, but I could. But then eventually we discovered Taiwan. I'm a Taiwanese citizen from birth, and so we checked it out, and she really liked it here. And actually, before even that, I proposed, and a big part of that was like, I feel like it's time, and it was time for me to stop moving from hotel to hotel. Despite the amazing service I got at Le Méridien Bangkok, the best hotel in the world. They let me leave 6 huge luggages there for years.
Wow.
And as a free storage, it was great. And knew all the staff by name. And the general manager came by every time to greet me. It was great. But I wanted to have roots in a place. I wanted to have a studio where I could just turn the lights on and press record. I wanted to have bookshelves and some steadiness in my life. And I had burned off that phase of my life where I was just traveling, moving all the time, and being very minimalist. And it was the same in my heart, in my relationship. Like, it's time. It's time to have kids. It's time to put down roots. It's time to double down on what's working. This is really great. I wanted to do it, go deeper. And if we continue to do this logistically, it's not going to work out. So that's how I did it. Like, something that she wanted, and I knew that it gave me a lot of joy to give that to her, that reassurance. And like, it's not like I needed the reassurance. I knew it was all, I'm in it, but I wanted to prove to her that you can relax. And I also wanted to show my family that this is serious. It's not just a girlfriend that David's got, but like, it's serious. So better respect it, move over, make some room. We're now a family unit. So I'm not going to drop everything just to fly back from some reunion. If it doesn't work out for us, we're a family now. So there are all these other things. And then, of course, the government. The governments need to respect it so that you can get a freaking visa and bring her over, or she can bring you over, whatever it is. And that's how it went.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
I always enjoy hearing these stories, how it works out. Before I let you go, so David Tian PhD.com, is that the best place people can find you? Yeah.
David Tian PhD.com, and then just go through the menu. You can find our free masterclass opt-in there. So just enter your email and you'll get access.
Great. And before I let you go, I'm going to do my cheesy thing at the end of my interviews where I'm going to ask you to complete these sentences with one or two words, the first things that come to mind.
Okay.
The quality I am most drawn to in the opposite sex is?
Oh, sexiness.
Sexiness. I would most like to be remembered as?
Good.
Love is?
Oh, everything. Love is what makes life worth living.
Well put. Well, this is great. Thanks a lot for this, David. This was great.
Thank you, man. A lot of fun. Thanks for the questions too. Excellent.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Humans in Love. If you'd like to learn more about my guests, my work, or you'd like to listen to back episodes of the podcast, please visit humansinlove.com. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Humans in Love using your podcast app of choice. If you're a fan of Humans in Love, and you'd like to help keep the show going and help me spread the word, please take 30 seconds out of your day to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Before I let you go, remember that life is short, so let's make it count. And thank you, as always, for your listenership and support. I'll talk to you again very soon.